The Oregon coast stretched endlessly along the Pacific, its rugged cliffs and pristine beaches forming one of America's most dramatic and mysterious shorelines. In the small coastal town of Bandon, population 2,000 to 800, the rhythm of life moved with the tides, and the locals had learned to respect both the beauty and the unpredictable nature of the sea that defined their existence. It was here, on the evening of September 15, 1991, that David and Sarah Chen decided to take what would become the most famous beach walk in Oregon's recorded history. David Chen, 34 years old, was a marine biologist from Portland who had spent the better part of 5 years studying the unique ecosystem of the Oregon coast. Originally from San Francisco, where his parents had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1950s, David had fallen in love with the Pacific Northwest during his graduate studies at Oregon State University. His research focused on tidal pool ecosystems and the impact of climate change on marine biodiversity, work that required him to spend extensive periods along various stretches of the Oregon coastline. Sarah Mitchell Chen, 31, was a freelance photographer who specialized in nature and wildlife photography. Born and raised in Eugene, Oregon, she had met David during one of his research expeditions in 1987, when she was documenting coastal erosion for a National Geographic assignment. Their shared passion for the natural world had quickly evolved into a deep personal connection, and they had married 2 years later in a small ceremony overlooking the Pacific near Cannon Beach. The couple had rented a beach house in Bandon for the month of September 1991, combining David's research season with Sarah's work on a photography book about the Oregon coast. The rental property, owned by local resident Margaret Foster, was a modest 2-bedroom cottage located approximately half a mile inland from the beach, connected to the shore by a well-worn trail that wound through coastal pine forest and sand dunes. September 15th had been an unusually clear day for the Oregon coast in late summer. The typical autumn fog that shrouded the shoreline had lifted, revealing spectacular views of the rugged sea stacks and natural arches that made Bandon famous among photographers and tourists. David had spent the day collecting specimens from tidal pools south of town, while Sarah had been photographing the dramatic interplay of light and shadow as the sun moved across the coastal landscape. According to their daily routine, which they had maintained throughout their month-long stay, the couple typically took an evening walk along the beach around sunset. These walks served multiple purposes. They allowed David to observe nocturnal marine activity, gave Sarah opportunities to capture the golden hour lighting that made coastal photography so spectacular, and provided the couple with quiet time to discuss their work and plans for the future. On the evening of September 15th, Margaret Foster, who lived in the main house on the property and occasionally checked on her rental guests, observed David and Sarah leaving their cottage at approximately 6:15 p.m. Both were dressed appropriately for a coastal evening. David wore jeans, a windbreaker, and sturdy hiking boots, while Sarah carried her camera equipment in a waterproof bag and wore layers suitable for the dropping temperatures that typically accompanied Oregon sunsets. They seemed perfectly normal, Margaret later told investigators. They waved when they saw me in my garden, and Sarah mentioned that she was hoping to get some shots of the tide pools at sunset. They seemed excited about the clear weather. The trail from their cottage to the beach was approximately a 20-minute walk through relatively easy terrain. David and Sarah had made this journey dozens of times during their stay, and both were experienced hikers familiar with coastal conditions and safety precautions. The beach at Bandon was known for its dramatic rock formations, extensive tide pools, and powerful surf that could change rapidly with weather conditions. Local residents and frequent visitors understood the importance of staying aware of tide schedules, as certain areas of the beach could become inaccessible or dangerous during high tide. On September 15th, low tide was scheduled for 7:45 p.m., which meant that David and Sarah would have optimal conditions for exploring tide pools and photographing the exposed marine life that emerged during these periods. Thomas Brennan, a local fisherman who knew the coastal waters better than anyone in Bandon, was returning from a day of fishing when he spotted David and Sarah on the beach around 6:45 p.m. His boat was approximately 200 yards offshore, and he observed the couple through binoculars as they walked north along the waterline. They were walking slowly, stopping frequently to look at things in the tide pools, Brennan testified later. The woman was taking photographs, and the man was collecting something in what looked like specimen containers. They appeared to be enjoying themselves and seemed completely safe. Brennan's observation was significant because it established that David and Sarah had successfully reached the beach and were conducting their normal evening activities without any apparent problems or distress. At approximately 7:15 p.m., Jennifer Martinez, a jogger who regularly ran along the beach in the evenings, encountered David and Sarah near a distinctive rock formation known locally as Cathedral Rock, a massive sea stack that stood about 50 feet offshore and was accessible during low tide. "I remember them clearly because they were such a nice couple," Martinez recalled. "I had seen them several times during my evening runs over the past few weeks. They always said hello and seemed very interested in the marine life. That night they asked me about the tide schedule because they wanted to explore some tide pools around Cathedral Rock. Martinez provided them with information about the tide timing and warned them, as was customary among locals, to be careful around Cathedral Rock because the area could become cut off from shore relatively quickly when the tide turned. They thanked me and said they would be careful," Martinez continued. "They seemed very knowledgeable about beach safety. The woman mentioned that they had been exploring the coast for weeks and understood the risks." This conversation with Jennifer Martinez occurred approximately 300 yards north of where David and Sarah had been observed by Thomas Brennan 30 minutes earlier, indicating that the couple was making normal progress along their planned route. At 7:30 p.m., 15 minutes after her encounter with the Chens, Martinez completed her run and was returning south along the same stretch of beach. She expected to see David and Sarah still exploring the tide pools around Cathedral Rock, but the area appeared to be empty. "I thought maybe they had moved further north or had gone back to explore a different area," Martinez explained. "It didn't seem unusual at the time because there were lots of interesting spots along that stretch of beach." The tide schedule for September 15th indicated that low tide would occur at 7:45 p.m., followed by an incoming tide that would gradually cover the lower beach areas over the following 6 hours. This timing meant that David and Sarah would have had optimal conditions for tide pool exploration between 7 and 8:30 p.m. As evening progressed into night, several other people were present on various sections of Bandon Beach, but no one reported seeing David and Sarah Chen after Jennifer Martinez's 7:15 p.m. encounter. Robert and Helen Kimura, an elderly couple from Portland who were staying at a nearby bed and breakfast, walked their dog along the beach around 8 p.m. They covered the same general area where David and Sarah had been exploring, but saw no signs of the young couple. "We specifically looked around Cathedral Rock because our dog loves to explore that area," Helen Kimura stated. "We didn't see anyone, and we didn't notice anything unusual. The tide was coming in, but slowly, and the conditions seemed perfectly safe." By 9 p.m., most beach visitors had returned to their accommodations for the evening. The incoming tide had begun to cover some of the lower areas where tide pool exploration typically occurred, but the main beach remained accessible and safe. Margaret Foster became concerned when David and Sarah had not returned to their cottage by 10 p.m. During their month-long stay, the couple had established a consistent pattern of returning from their evening walks by 8:30 or 9 p.m., depending on weather conditions and the timing of sunset. "They were very responsible people," Margaret explained. David always carried a watch and was very conscious of tide schedules. Sarah was careful with her expensive camera equipment and never stayed out after dark. When they weren't back by 10 o'clock, I knew something was wrong. Margaret Foster walked to the beach access trail and called out for David and Sarah, but received no response. The trail was clearly marked and well maintained, making it highly unlikely that experienced hikers could become lost or disoriented while returning to their cottage. At 10:30 p.m., Margaret contacted the Bandon Police Department to report that her rental guests appeared to be overdue from an evening beach walk. Officer Janet Rodriguez responded to Margaret's call and immediately began a preliminary search of the beach access trail and the immediate shoreline area. Rodriguez was familiar with the Chen couple, having met them several times during their stay when they had visited the police station to inquire about beach safety regulations for David's research activities. They were very conscientious people who asked intelligent questions about local conditions, Rodriguez later testified. They understood the risks associated with coastal activities and had impressed me as being well prepared and safety conscious. Rodriguez's initial search revealed no immediate signs of distress or emergency. The beach access trail showed normal foot traffic, and there were no signs of struggle, injury, or abandoned equipment along the route between the cottage and the shore. At 11:45 p.m., Rodriguez called for additional assistance, and a more systematic search was organized involving local volunteers, Coast Guard personnel, and search and rescue teams from Coos County. The search operation that began on the night of September 15th and continued intensively for the following 2 weeks would become one of the most extensive missing person investigations in Oregon coast history. Search teams combed every accessible area of Bandon Beach and the surrounding coastline. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the ocean and shoreline. Coast Guard boats searched offshore waters for any signs of the missing couple. Volunteers walked beach areas with metal detectors, looking for Sarah's camera equipment or any other belongings that might provide clues about what had happened. The search efforts were complicated by changing weather conditions. A storm system moved in 3 days after the disappearance, bringing heavy rains and high winds that altered beach conditions and potentially washed away any physical evidence that might have remained. Detective Michael Torres, assigned to lead the investigation by the Coos County Sheriff's Department, interviewed everyone who had been on Bandon Beach during the evening of September 15th. He constructed a detailed timeline of David and Sarah's movements and activities, but found no evidence of foul play, accident, or dangerous weather conditions that could explain their disappearance. We have a couple who were experienced with coastal conditions, properly dressed for the environment, carrying appropriate equipment, and following safety protocols they had used successfully for weeks, Detective Torres summarized in his initial report. They were last seen engaged in normal activities in a safe area during optimal conditions. There is no apparent reason why they should have encountered any difficulties. The investigation explored multiple theories. Accidental drowning. Ocean conditions on September 15th were moderate, with waves of 3 to 4 feet and no unusual currents or dangerous surf. Both David and Sarah were strong swimmers, and they had demonstrated consistent awareness of water safety during their stay. Equipment failure or injury. No abandoned equipment was found, and the areas where the couple had been exploring were relatively benign, with stable rock formations and minimal risk of serious injury. Voluntary disappearance. David and Sarah had left behind all their possessions at the cottage, including research materials, expensive camera equipment, personal documents, and their vehicle. Their behavior during the days preceding their disappearance had been normal, and they had made plans for activities the following week. Criminal activity. There was no evidence of other people in the area who might have posed a threat, no signs of struggle, and no apparent motive for anyone to harm the couple. Weather emergency. Conditions on September 15th had been unusually clear and stable, with no sudden weather changes that could have created dangerous situations. After 2 weeks of intensive searching, the official investigation was scaled back, though the case remained open. David and Sarah Chen were officially classified as missing persons, and their disappearance became part of the folklore of the Oregon coast. The Chen family from San Francisco and Sarah's family from Eugene maintained pressure on law enforcement to continue investigating the case. They offered substantial rewards for information and hired private investigators to pursue leads that official investigations might have missed. But no credible evidence ever emerged to explain what had happened to David and Sarah Chen during their evening walk on Bandon Beach. The cottage where they had been staying was eventually cleaned out by family members, who found everything exactly as the couple had left it. David's research notes included detailed observations about tide schedules and marine life. Sarah's photography equipment and film revealed beautiful images of the Oregon coast, with the last photographs taken on the afternoon of September 15th showing the tide pools and rock formations near Cathedral Rock. The final image on Sarah's camera was a photograph of David examining a sea anemone in a tide pool, taken at approximately 5:30 p.m. on the day they disappeared. In the background of the photo, Cathedral Rock was visible, and the lighting indicated that the picture had been taken during the golden hour before sunset. This photograph would later become significant not just as the last known image of the couple, but as evidence that they had been in the exact location where, 33 years later, an impossible discovery would reopen their case and challenge everything that investigators thought they understood about the nature of their disappearance. For 3 decades, the mystery of David and Sarah Chen remained unsolved, a source of ongoing pain for their families and a reminder to coastal communities about the unpredictable dangers that could claim even the most prepared and careful visitors to the sea. But the ocean, which had taken their secrets in 1991, was preparing to return something that no one expected, evidence that would prove more mysterious than the original disappearance itself. September 15, 2024, marked exactly 33 years since David and Sarah Chen had vanished from Bandon Beach. What should have been just another anniversary of an unsolved mystery became the day that one of Oregon's most baffling cold cases would take a turn that defied every law of physics and rational explanation. Dr. Emily Rodriguez, a coastal geologist from Oregon State University, had chosen this specific date to conduct research at Bandon Beach as part of a long-term study on coastal erosion and climate change impacts. The timing was intentional. She wanted to document how the beach had changed over the decades since the Chen disappearance, which had become a case study in her graduate-level course on coastal safety and emergency response. Emily had been familiar with the Chen case since her undergraduate years. As a student of coastal geology, she had studied the official reports, analyzed the tide data from September 1991, and even written her master's thesis partially on how coastal conditions could contribute to unexplained disappearances. The Chen case represented a perfect storm of variables that made scientific analysis both fascinating and frustrating. At 32 years old, Emily had established herself as one of the leading experts on Oregon coastal dynamics. Her research focused on how human activity intersected with natural coastal processes, and she had consulted on several missing person cases along the Pacific coast. The Chen disappearance remained unique in her experience because of the complete absence of any physical evidence or logical explanation. Emily arrived at Bandon Beach at 5:30 a.m. on September 15, 2024, planning to document the beach conditions during the same tidal cycle that had occurred 33 years earlier. Her research assistant, Jake Morrison, a graduate student in marine biology, accompanied her with specialized equipment for measuring sand composition, tide pool biodiversity, and coastal erosion patterns. The morning was unusually clear for September, reminiscent of the weather conditions that had prevailed on the day of the Chen disappearance. Emily noted the irony as she set up her equipment near Cathedral Rock, the same area where David and Sarah had last been seen alive. "It's almost eerie," she commented to Jake as they established their research station. "The weather conditions are nearly identical to what they were 33 years ago. Same clarity, same calm ocean, same tide schedule." Emily's research protocol required her to document the beach systematically, photographing and measuring various sections in a grid pattern that would allow for precise comparison with historical data. She began at the southern end of the beach and worked northward, following approximately the same route that David and Sarah Chen had taken on their final walk. At 6:45 a.m., as Emily approached the tide pools near Cathedral Rock, she noticed something that stopped her in her tracks. Preserved in the wet sand, appearing as fresh as if they had been made minutes earlier, were two sets of human footprints. Emily's first reaction was practical. Someone else must have walked on the beach earlier that morning, perhaps another researcher or an early morning jogger. But as she examined the prints more closely, several details made her increasingly uneasy. The footprints were positioned in the exact location where, according to witness testimony from 1991, David and Sarah Chen had been exploring tide pools when they were last seen. The prints appeared to show two people walking slowly, stopping frequently, and moving in the distinctive pattern that witnesses had described the missing couple following 33 years earlier. More unsettling, the footprints showed no signs of the normal weathering that would occur from wind, water, or time. Despite the fact that high tide had covered this area of the beach just 6 hours earlier, the prints were perfectly preserved, with crisp edges and clear detail that indicated they had been made very recently. "Jake," Emily called to her research assistant, "come look at this." Jake approached and examined the footprints with the trained eye of someone who had spent years studying coastal environments. His expression grew increasingly puzzled as he analyzed what they were seeing. "These are fresh," he confirmed. "I'd say made within the last few hours, but that's impossible. High tide covered this entire area until around 1 a.m. These prints should have been washed away." Emily began photographing the footprints from multiple angles, using specialized equipment that could capture minute details and dimensional measurements. As she worked, she noticed additional details that made the discovery even more extraordinary. The footprints showed two distinct sets. A larger set, approximately size 10 men's shoe, with a tread pattern consistent with hiking boots. A smaller set, approximately size 7 women's shoe, with a different tread pattern suggesting different footwear. The spacing and depth of the prints indicated two people walking together at a leisurely pace, stopping occasionally and moving in a pattern consistent with tide pool exploration. Most remarkably, the prints appeared to follow the exact route that witness testimony had placed David and Sarah Chen on their final evening. The footprints began near the area where Jennifer Martinez had encountered the couple in 1991, moved toward Cathedral Rock, and continued around the tide pools where Thomas Brennan had observed them from his fishing boat. Emily immediately contacted the Coos County Sheriff's Department to report the discovery. Given the historical significance of the location and the impossible nature of fresh footprints appearing in an area that had been underwater hours earlier, she knew this required official investigation. Detective Lieutenant Sarah Walsh arrived at the beach within 45 minutes of Emily's call. Walsh had been with the Sheriff's Department for 15 years and was familiar with the Chen case, though she had not been involved in the original investigation. She brought with her a crime scene photographer and a forensic specialist experienced in analyzing physical evidence in coastal environments. "Dr. Rodriguez," Walsh said as she examined Emily's photographs, "are you certain these prints weren't here yesterday?" "Lieutenant, I've been studying this beach for years. I was here just last week conducting preliminary measurements. These prints definitely were not present then, and the tide cycle makes it impossible for them to have survived from any earlier period." Detective Walsh had the footprints photographed extensively, and measured using forensic techniques that would allow for comparison with any existing evidence from the original Chen investigation. The crime scene photographer, Maria Santos, used advanced 3D imaging technology to create detailed digital models of the prints. "The preservation is extraordinary," Santos observed. "These look like they were made in ideal sand conditions, slightly moist, fine-grained, with perfect compression, but the location and timing make no sense given the tidal data." As the investigation team worked to document the footprints, Emily continued her own scientific analysis. She took samples of the sand around the prints, measured the depth and compression patterns, and used specialized equipment to analyze the moisture content and composition of the impressions. Her findings defied logical explanation. The sand inside the footprints showed compression patterns consistent with fresh impressions made by people of approximately 140–180 pounds. The moisture content was optimal for print preservation, but inconsistent with sand that had been underwater hours earlier. Most puzzling, the sand showed trace minerals and biological matter that typically took weeks to accumulate in undisturbed coastal environments. "It's as if these prints were made under perfect laboratory conditions," Emily explained to Detective Walsh, "but they're in a location that was definitely underwater at high tide last night." The investigation expanded when Detective Walsh contacted Margaret Foster, the property owner who had been present during the original Chen disappearance and was still living in the same house at age 87. Margaret arrived at the beach around noon, moving slowly but with clear determination to see what had been discovered. When shown the footprints, her reaction was immediate and emotional. "Those are exactly where I saw David and Sarah walking that last evening," she said with tears in her eyes. "I watched them from my garden, and they were moving just like that, slowly, stopping to look at things, the man a little ahead of the woman." Margaret's confirmation of the location match was significant, but even more important was what she revealed about the morning of the discovery. "I was awake early this morning, around 4 a.m., because I couldn't sleep," she explained. "I was thinking about David and Sarah because today is the anniversary. I looked out toward the beach, and I could swear I saw two figures walking down there." "Could you see them clearly?" Detective Walsh asked. "Not clearly, no. It was still dark, and I don't see as well as I used to, but there were definitely two people walking together along the waterline. I assumed it was early morning joggers or researchers." "Did you see them return?" "No. I went back to bed around 4:30, and when I looked again at sunrise, the beach was empty." Margaret's testimony suggested that someone had been on the beach during the early morning hours when the footprints would have been made. But her description of two figures walking together in the pre-dawn darkness added another layer of mystery to an already inexplicable situation. Detective Walsh contacted the original investigators from the Chen case, hoping to compare the new footprints with any evidence that might have been preserved from 1991. Retired Detective Michael Torres, now 73, drove from his home in Eugene to examine the discovery personally. Torres brought with him the original case files, including photographs, witness statements, and the few physical evidence items that had been collected during the initial investigation. Among these items were plaster casts of footprints that had been found near the beach access trail in 1991. Though these had been determined to be unrelated to the disappearance. When Torres compared the new footprints with historical evidence, he made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the investigation team. The size and tread patterns of the new footprints matched exactly with shoe impressions that had been documented from David and Sarah Chen's rental cottage in 1991. These impressions had been taken from mud outside the cottage door and had been used to confirm the couple's shoe sizes for the missing person reports. These prints are consistent with David Chen's hiking boots, size 10.5, and Sarah Chen's walking shoes, size 7, Torres confirmed after careful comparison. The tread patterns match the shoes we documented as missing with the couple. The implications were staggering. Not only had fresh footprints appeared in an impossible location under impossible circumstances, but they appeared to match the missing couple whose disappearance had occurred exactly 33 years earlier. Detective Walsh ordered additional forensic analysis, bringing in experts from the Oregon State Police Crime Lab and consulting with specialists in unusual missing person cases from around the country. Dr. David Kim, a forensic anthropologist from Portland State University, analyzed the footprint measurements and gait patterns. His conclusion was both scientifically rigorous and deeply unsettling. The footprints show characteristics consistent with two adults, male and female, walking together at a relaxed pace, Dr. Kim reported. The gait patterns, stride length, and foot positioning match the physical characteristics documented for David and Sarah Chen. However, the prints show no signs of aging, weathering, or any time-related deterioration that would be expected if they had been made decades ago. "What's your scientific opinion about when these prints were made?" Detective Walsh asked. "Based on all physical evidence, these footprints were made within the last 12 hours, but that's impossible given the tidal conditions and the historical context." The investigation team also consulted with Dr. Rachel Thompson, a specialist in coastal geology and tidal dynamics from the University of Oregon. Dr. Thompson analyzed the sand conditions, tidal data, and environmental factors that could theoretically preserve footprints under unusual circumstances. "There is no known natural phenomenon that could preserve footprints in this location for 33 years, Dr. Thompson concluded. The area is subject to regular tidal action, storm activity, and seasonal changes that would eliminate any surface impressions within days or weeks at most." Could there be any geological explanation for fresh prints appearing in this location? No. The sand composition, moisture levels, and preservation quality all indicate recent formation. But the tidal cycle makes it impossible for anyone to have accessed this area to make these prints during the time frame when they would have been formed. As word of the discovery spread, the Chen case attracted national media attention. News crews arrived in Bandon to document the impossible footprints, and the story became a sensation on social media and true crime forums. The Chen family members, now scattered across the country, traveled to Oregon to see the discovery for themselves. David's younger brother, Professor James Chen of UC Berkeley, and Sarah's sister, Dr. Lisa Mitchell of Portland, both confirmed that the footprint sizes and patterns match their memories of their siblings' footwear. "David always wore those specific hiking boots," James Chen told reporters. "He had them resoled multiple times because he loved them so much. The tread pattern in these prints looks exactly like what I remember." Dr. Lisa Mitchell was more skeptical but equally moved by the discovery. Sarah was very particular about her walking shoes. She had exactly one pair that she used for all her coastal photography work. The size and shape of these prints match what she would have worn. The discovery prompted a renewed investigation into the original Chen disappearance. Detective Walsh assembled a cold case team to re-examine all evidence from 1991, looking for any clues that might explain both the original disappearance and the impossible reappearance of what appeared to be the couple's footprints. The team discovered several details from the original investigation that had been overlooked or dismissed at the time. Multiple witnesses had reported unusual atmospheric conditions on the evening of September 15, 1991, including strange light patterns over the ocean and an unusual silence that had settled over the coastal area around sunset. Thomas Brennan, the fisherman who had observed David and Sarah from his boat, had mentioned in his original statement that his compass had behaved erratically while he was offshore that evening, though this detail had been attributed to equipment malfunction. Jennifer Martinez, the jogger who had spoken with the couple, had described feeling strangely uneasy after her encounter with David and Sarah, though she had attributed this to general anxiety about running alone on an isolated beach. Most significantly, several residents of Bandon had reported experiencing unusual dreams on the night of September 15, 1991. These dreams consistently involved images of people walking on the beach, but the details had been dismissed as psychological responses to the community's anxiety about the missing couple. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, a parapsychologist from Portland State University who specialized in unexplained phenomena, was consulted about the possibility that the footprints represented some form of paranormal occurrence. While I approach these cases with scientific skepticism, Dr. Hayes explained, there are documented instances of temporal anomalies associated with traumatic events. If David and Sarah Chen experienced something extraordinary during their disappearance, it's theoretically possible that some form of environmental imprint could manifest under specific conditions. What kind of conditions? Anniversary dates are significant in paranormal research. The 33-year cycle could represent a temporal confluence where conditions that existed in 1991 are somehow recreated. Combined with the emotional energy surrounding the disappearance, this could theoretically produce physical manifestations. The footprints remained visible for exactly 24 hours. On the morning of September 16, 2024, high tide swept across the beach and removed all traces of the mysterious impressions, just as it had removed any evidence of David and Sarah Chen 33 years earlier. But the discovery had reopened one of Oregon's most famous cold cases and introduced questions that challenged conventional understanding of time, space, and the nature of unresolved mysteries. The investigation that followed would reveal that the footprints were only the beginning of a phenomenon that suggested David and Sarah Chen had not simply disappeared. They had become part of something far more complex and mysterious than anyone had imagined possible. The discovery of the impossible footprints had transformed the Chen case from a cold missing person investigation into something that challenged the fundamental understanding of reality itself. But it was what happened in the weeks following September 15, 2024, that would reveal the true nature of David and Sarah Chen's fate and force investigators to confront possibilities that existed beyond conventional science. Dr. Emily Rodriguez had become obsessed with solving the mystery. As a scientist, she could not accept phenomena that defied natural laws without exhaustive investigation. She established a continuous monitoring station at Bandon Beach using motion sensors, infrared cameras, and environmental measurement equipment to document any unusual activity in the area where the footprints had appeared. Her dedication to the case had personal dimensions that went beyond professional curiosity. Emily's own parents had disappeared in a hiking accident when she was 12 years old, and she had spent her entire career studying environments where people vanished without explanation. The Chen case represented the intersection of her scientific expertise and her deepest personal quest for answers about unexplained disappearances. Working with Detective Walsh and a growing team of specialists, Emily had spent weeks analyzing every aspect of the September 15th footprint incident. The data revealed patterns that suggested the phenomenon was not random, but followed specific environmental and temporal conditions that could potentially be predicted. The breakthrough came on October 13th, exactly 28 days after the footprint discovery, when Emily's monitoring equipment detected unusual electromagnetic activity in the beach area around Cathedral Rock. The readings showed energy patterns that were unlike anything documented in coastal environments, resembling more closely the signatures associated with aurora borealis or other atmospheric phenomena. The electromagnetic field is behaving as if there's a massive energy source beneath the ocean floor, Emily explained to Detective Walsh as they reviewed the data. But geological surveys show nothing unusual in this area. The readings suggest something that shouldn't be possible. Dr. Marcus Webb, a quantum physicist from Oregon State University who had joined the investigation team, analyzed Emily's electromagnetic data and made a connection that would prove crucial to understanding the Chen disappearance. These energy signatures are consistent with theoretical models of temporal distortion, Dr. Webb explained during a consultation with the investigation team. If space-time were somehow folded or compressed in this location, it could create conditions where events from different time periods could interact or overlap. "Are you suggesting time travel?" Detective Walsh asked skeptically. "Not time travel in the science fiction sense, but theoretical physics has established that time is not as linear as we experience it in everyday life. Under certain conditions, particularly those involving intense electromagnetic fields, temporal boundaries can become permeable." Dr. Webb's theory led to a collaboration with Dr. Sarah Kim, a researcher at the SETI Institute who specialized in analyzing unusual electromagnetic phenomena. Dr. Kim brought equipment typically used for detecting extraterrestrial signals to examine the Bandon Beach anomaly. "What we're detecting is not extraterrestrial, Doctor," Kim concluded after a week of intensive monitoring, "but it's definitely not terrestrial in any conventional sense. The energy patterns suggest a stable but localized distortion in the normal flow of time." The investigation took a dramatic turn when Margaret Foster, the property owner who had witnessed David and Sarah's departure in 1991, revealed information she had kept secret for 33 years. "I need to tell you something I should have said decades ago," Margaret confessed to Detective Walsh during a private interview. "On the night David and Sarah disappeared, I saw something that I thought no one would believe." "What did you see, Mrs. Foster?" "After they walked to the beach, I was watching from my bedroom window because I was worried about them being out after dark. Around 9 o'clock, I saw a strange light appear over the ocean about where Cathedral Rock is located." What kind of light?" "It was unlike anything I'd ever seen, not like lightning or boat lights. It was a soft, blue-white glow that seemed to hover above the water. And in the middle of that light I could see 2 figures standing on the beach." "Could you identify the figures?" "They were definitely David and Sarah. I could see their silhouettes clearly against the light. But they seemed different somehow, like they were not quite solid." Margaret described watching the strange light phenomenon for approximately 15 minutes. During this time, she observed David and Sarah moving around the beach area, but their movements seemed disconnected from normal physical laws. They appeared to glide rather than walk, and at times seemed to be standing in areas that should have been covered by incoming tide. The light gradually faded, and when it was gone, I couldn't see David and Sarah anymore. I thought maybe they had walked back toward the cottage, using a route I couldn't see from my window. When they didn't return, I assumed they had gotten lost or injured somewhere along the trail. Margaret's revelation prompted Detective Walsh to re-interview all surviving witnesses from the original investigation, specifically asking about unusual lights or atmospheric phenomena that might have been dismissed or forgotten over the years. Thomas Brennan, the fisherman who had observed David and Sarah from his boat, was now 78 years old and living in a retirement community in Coos Bay. When asked specifically about unusual lights, his memory was triggered. "Now that you mention it, there was something strange that night," Brennan recalled. "Around the time I lost sight of the couple on the beach, my boat's electrical system started acting up. The radio was crackling with static, and my compass was spinning like crazy." Did you see any unusual lights?" "There was definitely something over the water near Cathedral Rock. I thought it might be a Coast Guard helicopter with a searchlight, but it was the wrong color and moved in ways a helicopter couldn't move." Jennifer Martinez, the jogger who had spoken with David and Sarah, was tracked down to her current home in Portland. At 57, she worked as a nurse and had remained physically active throughout her life. When Detective Walsh asked her about the encounter in 1991, she provided details that had not been included in her original statement. "I remember feeling very strange after talking to David and Sarah that evening," Martinez revealed. "Not just nervous about running alone, but like something in the environment had changed. The air felt different, thicker somehow, and charged with electricity, like before a thunderstorm." "Did you notice any unusual lights or phenomena?" "Actually, yes. As I was running back toward town, I looked over my shoulder and saw what looked like aurora borealis over the ocean. But that's impossible in Oregon, especially in September. I convinced myself I had imagined it." The pattern emerging from these revised witness statements suggested that David and Sarah Chen had encountered some form of temporal or electromagnetic anomaly during their beach walk on September 15, 1991. The phenomenon had been witnessed by multiple people, but had been dismissed or suppressed due to its incredible nature. Dr. Webb, working with Dr. Kim and Emily Rodriguez, developed a theory that explained both the original disappearance and the reappearance of the footprints 33 years later. "We believe that David and Sarah Chen encountered a temporal vortex or dimensional rift that exists in the area around Cathedral Rock," Dr. Webb explained to the investigation team. "This phenomenon appears to be cyclical, becoming active under specific astronomical and electromagnetic conditions. What would happen to someone who encountered this phenomenon? Theoretically, they could become displaced in time while remaining in the same physical location. They might exist in a temporal loop or parallel dimension that occasionally intersects with our normal timeline." The theory gained support when Dr. Kim's electromagnetic monitoring equipment detected a pattern of energy bursts that occurred at regular intervals. The bursts peaked every 28 days, corresponding to lunar cycles, and showed increased intensity during specific astronomical alignments. "The next major energy peak is predicted for November 10th, Dr. Kim announced. If our theory is correct, this could be another opportunity for temporal interaction." Detective Walsh organized a comprehensive monitoring operation for November 10th, positioning teams of observers, scientists, and recording equipment around the Cathedral Rock area. The operation included representatives from the FBI's X-Files unit, researchers from major universities, and family members of David and Sarah Chen. At 7:15 p.m. on November 10, 2024, exactly the same time that David and Sarah had last been seen alive in 1991, the phenomenon manifested with unprecedented clarity. Witnesses observed a luminous distortion appearing in the air above Cathedral Rock, resembling heat shimmer but radiating soft blue-white light. Within this distortion, two human figures became visible, walking slowly along the beach in the same area where David and Sarah had disappeared 33 years earlier. Emily Rodriguez, monitoring the event with advanced recording equipment, captured video and electromagnetic data that documented the impossible. David and Sarah Chen, appearing exactly as they had in 1991, moving through their final beach walk in some form of temporal loop. "They're not quite solid," Emily reported through her radio. "They appear translucent, like holographic projections, but the electromagnetic signatures indicate they're generating real energy patterns." Dr. James Chen, David's younger brother, was among the observers who witnessed the phenomenon. Through tears, he confirmed the identification. "That's David. That's exactly how he moved, how he carried himself. And Sarah with her camera. That's her posture when she was photographing." The temporal manifestation lasted approximately 45 minutes, during which David and Sarah appeared to be experiencing their final evening in a continuous loop. They examined tide pools, took photographs, and moved together along the beach, but their actions seemed to reset periodically, as if they were trapped in a recurring cycle of the same experience. Most remarkably, when the tide reached the area where the couple was walking, they did not appear to notice the water, the ocean, pass through their forms without effect, confirming that they existed in a different temporal or dimensional state. Dr. Webb attempted to communicate with the temporal manifestations using various electromagnetic frequencies, but received no response. They appear to be experiencing September 15, 1991, in a closed loop, he explained. They may not be aware of our presence or of the passage of time since their disappearance. As the phenomenon began to fade, Dr. Kim detected a brief moment when the temporal barrier appeared to weaken. "Now!" she called out. "If we're going to attempt contact, this is our opportunity." Detective Walsh, equipped with a powerful radio transmitter, broadcasted a message toward the fading figures. "David, Sarah, can you hear us? This is 2024. Your families are here. We've been looking for you." For a moment that seemed to last forever, the translucent figures of David and Sarah paused in their movements. Sarah appeared to look directly toward the observation team, and David raised his hand as if he had heard something. Then Sarah Chen, appearing exactly as she had 33 years earlier, spoke words that everyone present would remember for the rest of their lives. "Tell our families we're okay. We're together, and we're not lost. We're just elsewhere." The phenomenon faded immediately after Sarah's message, leaving the beach empty except for fresh footprints that would disappear with the next high tide. The investigation concluded with a scientific paper co-authored by Dr. Webb, Dr. Kim, and Emily Rodriguez, documenting the first recorded case of confirmed temporal displacement involving human subjects. The paper, published in the Journal of Anomalous Physics, revolutionized theoretical understanding of time, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. For the Chen family, the discovery brought closure of a kind they had never expected. David and Sarah were not dead in any conventional sense, but existed in a stable temporal loop that allowed them to remain together for eternity, experiencing their final happy evening on an endless cycle. "In a way, it's beautiful," reflected Dr. Lisa Mitchell, Sarah's sister. "They're forever walking on that perfect evening, forever in love, forever exploring the natural world they both cherished. It's not the ending we would have chosen, but it's not really an ending at all." Bree. The Bandon Beach temporal anomaly was classified by federal authorities and became the subject of ongoing scientific study. The area around Cathedral Rock was designated as a research zone, with continuous monitoring to predict future manifestations and to ensure public safety. Margaret Foster, now 88, continued to live in her house overlooking the beach. She reported that on certain clear evenings, particularly during lunar alignments, she could still see faint figures walking along the shoreline. "It's comforting in a way," she said. "David and Sarah aren't really gone. They're still out there, still taking their evening walks, still discovering the wonders of the tide pools. Time might have captured them, but it also preserved them exactly as they were at their happiest moment." Emily Rodriguez established a permanent research station at Bandon Beach, dedicating her career to understanding temporal anomalies and helping other families find answers about loved ones who had disappeared under unusual circumstances. Her work led to the identification of similar phenomena at locations around the world, suggesting that the Chen case was part of a larger pattern of temporal mysteries that science was only beginning to understand. The final entry in Emily's research log, written 5 years after the initial footprint discovery, captured the profound implications of the Chen case. "We have learned that time is not the absolute constant we believed it to be. Under certain conditions, consciousness can become unstuck from linear temporal flow, creating pockets of existence that operate according to different physical laws. David and Sarah Chen have shown us that love and connection can transcend not only death, but time itself. They walk together still, in a moment that never ends, on a beach that exists outside of time. They have become proof that some bonds are stronger than the fundamental forces of physics, and that some love stories are literally eternal. Every 28 days, when the conditions are right, they return to remind us that the universe holds mysteries far greater than we can imagine, and that sometimes the most profound scientific discoveries come not from laboratories, but from the enduring power of human love to overcome any obstacle, even time itself. The footprints continue to appear periodically on Bandon Beach, each occurrence documented by researchers, but witnessed by anyone who believes that love can transcend the boundaries of space and time. David and Sarah Chen walk together still, forever young, forever exploring, forever proving that some disappearances are not endings, but transformations into something beyond our normal understanding of existence. Their story serves as a reminder that the ocean holds secrets deeper than its darkest trenches, and that sometimes, when people disappear into the unknown, they discover realms where different laws apply, and where true love creates its own reality that time cannot touch.